Hi, my name's Odellin. They didn't just leave my name off the funeral program, they left me out of my own father's legacy, then used my signature to steal everything I built. My sister smiled on stage, called herself the founder's only legacy, while I sat in the shadows, watching a tribute I wrote, narrated in her voice, under her name. But what they didn't know is I never stopped watching. And what I uncovered? It's the kind of truth that doesn't scream, it echoes. Ever been erased by your own family while they clapped for the person who did it? Before we dive in, what's the worst betrayal your own family ever made you swallow? Let me know below. And get ready, because this family drama doesn't end the way they thought it would. I parked 3 blocks away from the memorial center. Not because I had to, but because I needed the walk. Needed the time. The sky was cloudy, thick, colorless clouds that felt just right for the occasion. Spring hadn't broken through yet in San Mateo. There were no blooms, just that familiar stillness in the air that made everything feel paused. As I approached the tall glass doors, I saw their names printed on the welcome board outside. Thomas Kavanaugh, a life remembered, followed by a list of hosts, Seraphine Kavanaugh and family. That was it. No Odellin, no second daughter, not even a generic survived by 2 daughters. Inside, the lighting was warm, but the smiles were colder. The first person I made eye contact with looked at me the way you'd glance at someone from high school whose name you forgot. She gave a tight-lipped smile and looked back down at her phone. A sharply dressed young woman holding a clipboard approached. "Hi, do you need help finding your seat?" she asked. "I think I'm in the family section," I replied, as neutrally as I could. She looked me up and down, then scanned the printed list. I see Kavanaugh party is rows 1 through 3, but..." She hesitated. "You're not on this list." I didn't flinch. "It's fine, just show me to an open seat." She nodded quickly, gestured to an usher, and I was led to a side row by the aisle, close enough to see the stage, but far enough that I could pretend I was just a colleague from the firm. A small silver "reserved" sign had been placed on one of the seats in front of me. The usher hesitated for a second, glanced behind him, then silently removed it. As he walked off, someone else slid into the chair. I didn't need a label to tell me where I stood. That seat had said it all. The ceremony began with soft music and a slideshow, pictures of my father fishing, golfing, shaking hands with mayors and tech founders. Not a single photo of him teaching me how to check tire pressure when I got my first car. No candid of the 2 of us eating shrimp tacos at the gas station off Highway 92. Just the legacy shots, the curated public image. Then came Seraphine. She walked to the podium in a black dress tailored like armor. Her voice rang out crisp, collected. "My father believed in work, in vision, in legacy, and today as the CEO of the company he built, I promise you that vision will continue." Not once did she mention my name. She thanked the family, our supportive team, our investors who stood by us. She called Dad her compass, called the company their shared mission. The crowd clapped like they'd just watched a TED Talk. I sat still, my hands folded tightly in my lap. One guest, an old friend of Dad's from the construction days, glanced over with furrowed brows. He must have remembered. He must have known I was the other daughter. He looked away. After the final hymn, I slipped toward the reception area. Not many people stopped me. A few gave polite nods. I headed straight for the hallway near the side entrance, somewhere quiet to breathe. I checked my phone. 5 missed emails. One stood out. It was forwarded to my old company address. The one I'd forgotten was still routed to my personal inbox. It was from a thread titled, "Champagne Tonight." The message read, "She finally has it all. No more loose ends. Dad's out and O's out. Clean slate. Pop the champagne." It was meant for Seraphine's assistant team. The sender, her executive aide, the girl I'd trained 3 years ago when she joined us fresh out of college. I didn't feel shocked, just numb. Like my brain had already seen this before and filed it away. I hit forward, sent it to myself with the subject line, "Keep." I didn't storm in and slap anyone, didn't print it and throw it at her. I just stood there in the hallway next to a blown-up portrait of my father with hand-selected quotes underneath. Success demands sacrifice. Loyalty is everything. Build, even when no one watches. None of those words were mine. None of them were his either, not the real him. Just curated lines for display. A kid ran past, chasing a balloon. The string snapped, and it floated up toward the ceiling light. For a moment, I wished I were that balloon. Just rising, out, gone. Instead, I whispered, barely audible to myself, they didn't just bury him today. They buried me too. The inheritance announcement came less than a week after the funeral, and it felt more like a boardroom debrief than a moment of closure. I arrived at the company's San Mateo headquarters early, choosing the back stairwell over the glass elevator. It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that follows when everyone's already decided where you stand, and it's nowhere near the center. The meeting room was the same one we used for major quarterly reviews. Polished walnut table, water pitchers, a monitor off to the side looping a slideshow of Dad's highlights. I was directed to a seat at the far end, not beside Seraphine, not beside our legal counsel, Cash and Wolf, just at the edge. I didn't see my name on any folder. Cassian stood, cleared his throat, and began reading from the document in front of him. Per the wishes of Thomas Kavanaugh, and under the authority of the revised will filed on record 6 months prior. 6 months. The following allocations are to be made. The primary equity holdings, liquid accounts, and voting control of Kavanaugh Development Group shall transfer to Seraphine Kavanaugh, including all subsidiaries and media rights. I watched Seraphine lean back, hands clasped neatly in her lap. She nodded slowly, like she was receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award. Cassian continued. Odellin Kavanaugh shall receive a framed portrait in memory of Thomas, a personalized letter, and a one-time honorarium of $50,000. My ears didn't ring. My stomach didn't drop. I just blinked, once. Then came applause. Not from everyone, but enough. Some of the board members clapped like they'd just witnessed something noble. Seraphine stood and offered brief hugs to the staff closest to her, whispering things like, Dad would have wanted this, and let's keep the legacy clean. I didn't move. After everyone filtered out, Cassian lingered. Odellin, he said, almost whispering, do you have a moment? I followed him to a private side office. He closed the door. I want you to see something, he said, pulling out a document and sliding it across the desk toward me. It was familiar. My signature was at the bottom, dated 3 years ago. I scanned the header. Limited POA transfer for internal reallocation, KDG Holdings LLC. I remember this, I said quietly. Seraphine said it was just to cover some legal gaps while she handled the Texark merger. Temporary. Cassian nodded, jaw tight. It should have been temporary, but the document wasn't time-bound, and recently, it was updated with an addendum that made it permanent. I looked up. Who added that? He hesitated. It was filed under her authority, Seraphine's team. It's legal, but I don't think it's right. I leaned back in the chair, the breath slipping from my lungs like steam off a cold cup of tea. So she didn't just take it. She used my hand to do it. Cassian didn't answer. He didn't have to. Outside, the sky was turning, sunlight casting long sideways shadows down the building's glass walls. I stepped out into the hallway, still holding the paper. The frame of Dad and me had been left for me on the receptionist's counter, smiling at a beach I could no longer name, his arm around me, my eyes still hopeful. I walked it out to my car, laid it face down in the back seat. Inside the car, I opened my phone and took a screenshot of the document's updated filing. I created a new folder and named it Truth, Not Tears. That name wasn't just for files. It was a promise. I wasn't going to cry in parking lots anymore. I wasn't going to argue in rooms already scripted against me. And I wasn't going to let Seraphine play God with my name. As I fastened my seatbelt, a memory hit. Tea on the patio, 3 years ago. Her pouring from the glass pot, handing me a pen with a smile that now felt carved from ice. Sign this, she'd said. You trust me, right? Yes, I had. That would never happen again. The silence after betrayal is never empty. It hums. It circles around you. and as I sat in the passenger seat next to my mother, being driven to a gala held in my father's honor, I could feel that hum rising in my chest. 2 weeks had passed since the will was read. 2 weeks since I saw my signature weaponized against me. Now I was walking into an event celebrating legacy, one I'd helped build but was no longer part of. We pulled up to the venue in San Francisco's Marina District. Glass facade, silver lettering, a carpet rolled out more for optics than reverence. My invitation had come not from the company but from a former colleague, the kind who still had the decency to say, "You should be there." Inside, the space gleamed with nostalgia. Enlarged photos of construction milestones lined the entryway. A glass sculpture spiraled upward in the center of the room, etched with the words, "Legacy through Innovation." Underneath, in looping digital script, rotated names: board members, investors, founders. My name was not among them. I glanced at the program, neatly folded on each seat. Seraphine's photo graced the back cover. The tribute video would begin at 7:10 sharp, followed by a keynote address, hers. I was seated toward the back, far from the podium, beside an assistant who kept checking her smartwatch. My mother sat quietly next to me, her lips pressed into a neutral line. She didn't look at me. She hadn't said much since the will was read. But her silence wasn't confusion. It was habit. At 7:10, the lights dimmed. A soft piano chord played, and the screen flickered to life. The tribute began with Dad in his early years, helmet on, sleeves rolled up. Seraphine appeared beside him in every major shot, on site, in meetings, shaking hands with governors and donors. She narrated the film in smooth, practiced tones. I recognized the cadence, because I'd written it, or at least the speech it mimicked. Then came a clip from a pitch we gave at a tech summit years ago. It had been a turning point. The moment investors first saw us not as a family company, but as a scalable force. But in this version, Seraphine stood alone at the podium. My figure, once beside her, had been cropped out. The audio used her voice entirely, even though I was the one who had delivered the final section. The audience applauded, whispers floated in the air like static. A woman at the next table leaned in toward me. "Weren't you in that pitch too?" she asked, half curious, half unsure. I didn't smile. "I wrote that speech." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Huh." That was it. After the video, Seraphine rose from her seat and took the stage. Spotlights caught the shimmer of her gown, her jewelry, her power. She smiled, wide, controlled, then rested her hand on the podium. "I thank everyone who built this dream with me," she said, pausing just long enough to draw attention, and especially those who stepped aside so others could lead. The room filled with polite clapping. A few people glanced toward my section. I didn't return their looks. I knew exactly what that line meant. I hadn't stepped aside. I had been gently shoved, smiling faces all around, cameras clicking, as the door closed behind me. As soon as the applause ended, I stood. My mother followed without a word. We moved past polished tables, trays of champagne, and photo booths manned by staff in black. Outside, the air was crisp. The breeze tasted of salt and steel, a San Francisco kind of night. She lit a cigarette, something I hadn't seen her do in years. "You know," she said, voice low. "Maybe it's just the way things work now. You chose your path." I turned to her. The streetlight cast long shadows over her cheekbones. "I didn't walk away," I said evenly. "I was pushed, quietly, and applauded for it." She didn't argue, just drew in another breath and stared out at the city like she wasn't part of it. We stood like that for another minute, then I walked to the curb and called a rideshare. As the car pulled up, I looked back at the venue one last time. Through the glass doors, I saw Seraphine posing for a photo with a plaque in her hands. On it were words I'd once carved into a draft document years ago, meant to describe our shared mission. Built on honor, powered by truth. Except now, only one of us was still standing beneath them. After the gala, I stayed off the grid for a few days. No LinkedIn, no calls, no more polite nods from people who used to ask for my advice, now pretending I was just some face from a press release. But silence doesn't last long in a family like mine. That Tuesday, I got an invitation via courier, not email. A thick cream envelope embossed with gold, like a wedding invitation. Inside, a single card: "We'd love your voice at the Legacy Roundtable, celebrating vision, honoring unity." Signed by someone named Bexley Torres, the new chief marketing officer at Kavanaugh Systems. I hadn't met Bexley, but I knew the type. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 11 a.m., inside one of the glass conference suites at our old Palo Alto headquarters, the same building where I'd once spent sleepless nights coding the prototype for our first AI platform. Now I was returning as... what? A guest? A ghost? I arrived 5 minutes early. Bexley greeted me with a handshake that felt more like a photograph, staged and smiling. "Oh, Dylan, it's so great you could make time," she said, gesturing toward a long table ringed with glossy folders and pitchers of lemon water. "We're building something timeless here, and your presence, your energy, is vital." There were 6 people in the room, all unfamiliar faces, all younger than me, except for Seraphine, who walked in last. She wore white again, always white now. Clean lines, sculpted collars, the branding of rebirth. She gave me a soft smile, like I'd just handed her a favor without realizing it. "We're positioning this next quarter around family, legacy, and tech evolution," Bexley began, clicking to a PowerPoint slide titled, "The Kavanaugh Legacy, Sisters in Vision." I listened. I didn't interrupt. Not when they explained the visual direction, with mock-ups of Seraphine and me on rooftops in matching coats. Not when they played sample interview lines where I was supposed to say things like, "handing the torch was always part of the dream." I stared at the draft press release in front of me. It named me as founding consultant, a lifetime title with no equity, no vote, and no real meaning. Just words, a frame to keep me still. "So," I finally asked, "you want me to smile for the camera while holding a story that isn't mine anymore?" Bexley looked startled. "We just think it's important that your legacy doesn't go unrecognized." Seraphine added gently, "This keeps you visible. You'll be honored as the bridge to now." "The bridge that gets walked over," I said, folding the folder shut. There was an awkward beat. Then Bexley cleared her throat and said, "Of course, all participation is voluntary, but we do believe this would be healing for the public. And for you." Healing. That was the word they used when you had no real say, when they wanted you to look grateful for being allowed in the room that used to be yours. I left before they could take a group photo. I didn't go home. I went to see Cassian. He looked older than I remembered. His eyes didn't quite meet mine when he opened the door to his office. No secretary, no music playing, just the hum of guilt. "I need the truth," I said before he could even offer coffee. "Was I ever in the revised will? Did my father intend to leave me anything?" Cassian exhaled, long and heavy. He walked to a cabinet, pulled out a file, thin, unmarked. Inside was a draft will, one where I was listed, not just listed, equal beneficiary. But it wasn't the version that had been filed. "That was an early draft," he said. "It was never signed." "Why?" "Seraphine submitted a final version for notarization 2 days before your father's hospitalization." "And he approved it?" "I don't know. She said she had power of attorney. The notary was private. I only saw the filing once it was official." My mouth went dry, not from shock, from clarity. It wasn't an oversight. It wasn't grief. It was strategy. They didn't just want me out of the business. They wanted my name erased from every future mention. But now I had evidence that the erasure wasn't mutual. At least not at first. That night, I drove home in silence. Palo Alto streets blurred by headlights and rain. Once in my kitchen, I sat at the table, stared at a blank page in my old yellow legal pad. Then I picked up a pen and wrote 2 columns. What they took / what they forgot. I stared at the first column for a long time. Company shares, my voice in history, my father's final days. Then I looked at the second. They forgot I still knew where the bones were buried. They forgot I have every draft, every early design. They forgot what I taught Seraphine when she was fresh out of college and terrified of investor meetings. And they forgot that I don't break loud. I break wide. I clicked record on my phone and whispered, "I thought dignity meant walking away, but maybe it means standing long enough for them to look you in the eyes when they lie." Then I clicked save and named the file, Not a Ghost. The cottage was quiet. Too quiet. Even the wind outside seemed hesitant, as if it didn't want to interrupt whatever was unraveling inside me. I hadn't slept, not really. Just drifted in and out of uneasy memories. So when my phone buzzed at 3:47 a.m., I was already half awake. No subject line, no sender. Just an attachment titled dad_final_draft_3.pdf. My first instinct was suspicion. Scam? A cruel prank? But my thumb tapped the screen anyway. The file opened slowly, the glow of the document casting a bluish light across my blankets. It wasn't a prank. It was scanned, uneven, as if someone had rushed to capture it. My father's handwriting in blue ink sprawled across the margins. A line was circled at the bottom. Odalyn will take care of it the right way. My heart stopped moving, for just a breath. The document listed equal shares of the company to both me and Seraphine. It included a charitable trust I'd once encouraged him to establish, and it was dated exactly 30 days before his hospitalization. He had changed the will. He had trusted me. He didn't forget me. Someone else had made sure his intent never saw daylight. I didn't cry. I just sat there for a long time with the glow of the screen pulsing against my skin like a secret heartbeat. By 6 a.m., I was out of bed and rummaging through the old filing boxes in the hall closet. I hadn't touched them in years. Some still smelled faintly of printer toner and hotel coffee, remnants from early pitch trips, blueprints I'd drafted while he still called me the steady one. In a folder labeled Founding Equity Internal Use, I found a document with his signature, an older draft that also named me, with an identical clause. It wasn't proof enough, not in court, but it was a thread, and I was ready to pull it. By 7:30, I was sitting at the kitchen table in a sweater too big and socks mismatched, staring at the note I'd scribbled the night before. This isn't for revenge. This is for realignment. I picked up my phone and typed in a number I hadn't dialed in years. Marcellus James, logistics director for my father's company before Seraphine restructured the executive tier. Quiet, loyal, brilliant. The kind of man who knew how many servers we used per department without ever needing to check. He answered on the second ring. Odalyn. His voice still had that smooth Arizona cadence, like a man who never rushed a sentence. I need your eyes on something, I said. I think my father tried to fix things before they took over. I think it was buried. There was a pause. Then, text me the file. I'll run it against what's in the internal archive. Thank you, I whispered. I never stopped seeing what they were doing to you. I just wasn't in a position to stop it. No one was, I replied, but maybe now we are. After the call, I forwarded the PDF. No message, no subject, just like I'd received it. I stared at the sent notification for a moment, then opened my notes app. Typed only 2 words. Next move. The silence stretched through the afternoon. I tried replying to the anonymous email. Who are you? It bounced back. So instead of chasing ghosts, I grounded myself the only way I knew how. In memory. There was one that kept returning to me. 6 months before his death, my father and I sat outside a cafe near Dolores Park. He was drinking his usual, black coffee, 2 sugars. He watched pigeons like they were investors waiting for a pitch. Your sister, he'd said after a while, has fire. I braced myself for the usual comparison. But you, he continued, have your mother's calm. That's why I know you'll outlast all this noise. It hadn't sounded like a goodbye then, but now I hear it differently. He wasn't blind. He saw Seraphine's ambition, and he saw my patience. He just never realized she'd weaponize it. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and opened a fresh page in my yellow notepad. At the top, I wrote, what he saw / what they hid. And beneath it, my first bullet point. His trust wasn't loud, but it was real. This wasn't about lawsuits or revenge speeches. It was about restoring something that wasn't for sale. Truth. I didn't know who had sent me the will, but someone wanted the truth out. And if no one else had the courage to pull the curtain back, I would. Because they didn't just bury the will. They buried the version of me that had a voice. Not anymore. The air inside the storage unit smelled like cardboard and damp concrete. My boots echoed against the floor as I followed Marcellus through a narrow aisle of metal shelves, past rows of unlabeled boxes and dust-covered binders. He hadn't said much since picking me up that morning, just that we'd be meeting somewhere Seraphine's crew would never bother to look. The location was a forgotten records facility the company once used before its rebranding. Now it sat locked behind a dented roll-up gate and a keypad only Marcellus still remembered. He stopped in front of a rust-colored filing cabinet. "This one." I helped him pull it open. The folder he handed me was thick, heavy, and humming with quiet truth. "I kept these," he said, "because I knew one day someone would ask to see the truth, not the version sold to investors." Inside, strategy documents from our early days, notes scribbled in my handwriting next to his, project briefs I'd signed alongside our father, even a flyer for our original pitch night, my name listed first. I ran my fingers along a photo of the three of us, Dad, me, and Seraphine, all smiles. The caption read, "The minds behind Kavanaugh Labs." It was dated 4 years before I was edited out of existence. "So I was never erased," I whispered, "just overwritten." Marcellus didn't nod. He just watched me with something that looked like grief. An hour later, the door creaked open again. A young man in a hoodie and wire-rimmed glasses stepped inside, clutching a messenger bag like it contained state secrets. His name was Lyndon. He couldn't have been older than 27. "You're O'Dellin?" he asked. "It's strange meeting you. You're not in the system anymore." I raised an eyebrow. "That's the problem, isn't it?" He powered on his laptop and opened a mirrored drive. "I used to contract for your sister's transition team. Was part of migrating legacy systems to cloud. I wasn't supposed to keep access, but I did. And I saved some logs." He clicked into a folder labeled archive_old, legacy_tag_overrides. I watched the screen as a series of names, entries, and metadata lined up, each bearing my former employee ID, each showing a history of being replaced. Under Project Lead, my name had been rerouted to Seraphine's. Under Founder Mentions, citations were removed, replaced by blank fields or generic placeholder text. "They didn't delete you," Lyndon said, eyes fixed on the code. "They reattributed everything, like you were just background." I leaned in, staring at one line where a speech I'd given to the board was now credited to Seraphine. The timestamp was from the night I was in the hospital with pneumonia. "They made it look like I never existed," I muttered. The words came out flatter than I expected, almost like a line rehearsed for a play I never auditioned for. Marcellus laid a hand on the table. "This is proof. This isn't pain anymore. It's structure. It's intent." I nodded. "And intent is everything in court." Lyndon cleared his throat. "I also have a dump of email trails between the comms team and the rebrand consultants. They talk about removing all non-strategic founders from the public narrative. That phrase again and again. You were the only one it applied to." "Send it to me," I said. "Every line, every version." He handed me a flash drive. "Already on here. I don't know what you'll do with it, but people should know." We left the facility late in the afternoon. The sun was dropping behind the buildings, casting long lines of shadow across the alley. Back home, I laid everything on the dining table. Legal pads, printed memos, a few printed email screenshots from Lyndon's logs. And then, I hit record. My phone's camera caught me straight on. No filters, no script. "To the board," I began, "and to anyone who ever wonders why I disappeared. I didn't. I was moved. Quietly, deliberately, and with polish." I showed the pages one by one, dated memos, my own handwritten notes, video clips with matching timestamps. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make threats. I let the evidence speak louder than any outrage ever could. That night, I emailed Cash and Wolf. The subject line was simple. Preliminary briefing attached. Please advise the body. Let's not move in anger. Let's move with clarity. Then I wrote in my notepad. They took my name off the wall. Now I'll carve it into the foundation. By the time I stepped into the San Mateo boardroom, the clatter of coffee cups and soft chatter fell dead silent. Heads turned. Some lips parted. I didn't need to raise a hand. My presence alone cut through the artificial calm like a razor. I hadn't walked into that room in over 4 years. The assistant at the reception table glanced between me and her tablet, then froze. My name wasn't listed. Not on the roster, not on the printed packets by the chairs, not even in the digital guest registry. That was expected. I carried nothing but my phone and a single sealed envelope in my left hand. No bag, no assistant trailing behind me, no laptop. Just me. And what they all pretended never existed. There was one empty chair left along the side of the glass table. It wasn't next to Seraphine. It wasn't even near the head, but it was there. I nodded at it without sitting down. That chair would stay empty for now. Not because I didn't have a place, but because I chose not to take the one they offered me. Seraphine, standing at the head of the table, adjusted her blazer and cleared her throat. Thank you all for joining today's quarterly brand review. I'd like to begin by recentering our mission, legacy through innovation, and honoring the values our father instilled in this company. Not our father. Her voice made it sound like he was hers alone. Her presentation began, slides, metrics, staged photos, the usual show. Then, midway through her second bullet point, I stepped forward. I didn't interrupt. I didn't raise my voice. I simply placed the envelope on the table, sliding it across the polished surface until it stopped in front of the general counsel. I believe this belongs here, I said, since we're discussing legacy. She faltered. The envelope was unassuming, manila sealed in red wax. But inside it held everything she'd spent years trying to bury. The original version of our father's will, dated, signed, with handwritten notes, including the line, O'Dellin will take care of it the right way. Metadata logs proving digital tampering. Letters from Marcellus, who had overseen internal company strategy since year one, verifying project ownership and board participation. A sworn statement from Lyndon detailing the back-end purges and email chains that discussed erasing me from the public narrative. And one last thing, an email from my father to Cash and Wolf, timestamped just 12 days before his hospitalization. In it, my father wrote, I've asked Seraphine to hold the edits until I return from my appointment. O'Dellin and I need one more meeting. I owe her that. Seraphine stared at the envelope like it was leaking acid. I'm not here to reclaim what's been stolen, I continued, voice calm. I'm here to correct what's been rewritten. Then, behind her, the projector screen lit up. The IT tech, the same kid who'd once been told to purge me, cued the video file I'd scheduled for this exact moment. It wasn't a speech, it was a record. Footage of early pitch meetings, time-stamped documents with my signature. A voiceover, my voice, narrating the phases of our launch, our setbacks, our small victories. My father shaking my hand after the very first investor close. And finally, the part that made several in the room freeze. A boardroom photo, dated 7 years back. Me seated between Seraphine and our father, all of us smiling. You erased a daughter, my voice said in the recording, but you can't erase a foundation. When the screen faded to black, the room remained frozen. Not a single cough, not a flick of paper. One of the older board members leaned slightly forward and looked directly at Seraphine. Is this true? She didn't answer. Her jaw clenched, her eyes locked on me, unreadable. But her knuckles turned white as they gripped the edge of the table. I'm not here to disrupt, I said. I won't speak again today, but I expect each of you to review what I've submitted, quietly, thoroughly, honestly. I gathered nothing. I had nothing to gather. I nodded once to the legal team, then turned and walked out, leaving behind a silence so thick I could feel it clinging to my back like fog. Outside, the wind hit me harder than expected. But I wasn't cold. The hearing was held in one of the company's arbitration rooms, a sleek, soundproof space designed less for truth and more for damage control. Glass walls blurred with privacy film. Leather chairs sat in a circle that somehow made judgment feel collaborative, but nothing about today was gentle. I arrived a few minutes early, enough to register who was already there. Board members dressed in charcoal and navy, their eyes darting between one another, and Seraphine, already seated, chin lifted, voice low as she briefed her attorney. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. This wasn't surprise on her face, it was choreography. She'd planned this. When I took my seat, I didn't speak. Just placed my hands in my lap, fingers interlaced, and waited for the curtain to lift. Seraphine opened first. Her voice, cool as crystal, filled the room. I understand there's been confusion surrounding past agreements and roles. In the spirit of unity, I've brought forth this signed release, dated 3 years ago, where O'Dellin waived all future claims to company equity or control. She slid the paper forward like it was a gift. The board murmured. One member leaned forward, scanning it. Another pulled out their reading glasses. And for a moment, it felt like she had won again. I let her words settle into the walls, into their ears, before I moved. Where's the original? Silence. Then Cassian Wolf cleared his throat. Deliberately, he opened his briefcase and removed a leather folder. Inside, a document in older paper stock, creased once down the middle. This, Cassian said, placing it between the copies, is the full, original version of the agreement. He paused. It contains a clause, a reversal clause, inserted by O'Dellin and her father. The boardroom shifted. Postures stiffened. A few chairs creaked as backs straightened. Seraphine's lawyer leaned in, already objecting, but Cassian continued. If tampering with any foundational company asset was proven at any point, the agreement would be voided, immediately and irrevocably. Seraphine's eyes flared just for a moment. She masked it with a smile that didn't reach her mouth. That clause was never activated, because there was no tampering. I leaned forward. Until you changed timestamps, deleted my name, redirected authorship logs to yourself, called my work your legacy. Cassian looked at the board, then at Seraphine. It's activated now. Her face cracked, not in rage, but in quiet understanding. She knew. A beat passed, then another. Her attorney whispered something that didn't matter. Seraphine didn't blink. The meeting ended with no yelling, no slam of fists, just resignation. The board recessed in stunned quiet. But outside, the reckoning had already begun. By the time I walked down to the press lounge 2 floors below, the company's PR statement was already live. Seraphine Kavanaugh has stepped down to pursue independent ventures. The line was padded with praise and neutrality. No apologies, just absence. But the public wasn't stupid. The tribute gala clip was reposted within the hour, side by side with the documents I'd shared and verified by Wolf's firm. Former employees started chiming in, emails, screenshots, stories. My inbox flooded with names I hadn't seen in years, each offering a piece of the puzzle. One wrote, I always wondered why they cut your name from the investor decks. On social, the hashtags trended by noon. Kavanaugh Truth, co-founder erased, legacy restored. The narrative didn't just flip, it ignited. And yet, as I sat alone that evening, watching it all unfold, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. I hadn't wanted this path. I'd only walked it because the alternative was silence. I didn't want her to suffer. I just wanted her to admit I was never meant to disappear. The morning of the tribute, I stood by the window, coffee cooling in my hand, watching a pair of seagulls coast above Half Moon Bay. The wind had picked up. I hadn't RSVP'd to the board's invitation, but they had sent it anyway, printed, embossed, and for the first time, with my full name in bold. O'Dellin Kavanaugh, co-founder. I didn't reply. I just showed up. The company atrium had been transformed, orchids lining the walls, soft jazz humming beneath polite chatter. This wasn't just a tribute, it was a soft rebranding. After everything, they still wanted the illusion of continuity. Familiar faces greeted me with nods, some with shame, others with relief, but none dared say the words they should have said years ago. A young woman with a headset led me to my assigned seat. It wasn't on stage, it wasn't near the board. It was 2 rows back, just enough distance to remind me the spotlight was optional, and that day, I didn't want it. But on stage, just beside the podium, sat a single chair, empty. A gold nameplate read, O'Dellin Kavanaugh. I let the corner of my mouth curve slightly. It was a gesture I knew they didn't understand. They thought it was grace. It was clarity. The ceremony began. There were speeches. Safer, shorter than usual. No one wanted to misspeak. The new CEO, one of the younger board members, talked about legacy, stewardship, and returning to roots. Words carefully chosen, scrubbed of guilt, but trying. Then came the intern. She stepped onto the stage, nervous, holding a folded piece of paper. She couldn't have been more than 22. Her voice trembled as she read, "Before I joined this company, I studied the pitch decks from its early years, the ones with margins still hand-marked, the ones signed, not stamped. And I saw the name O, Kavanaugh, on every project I admired. I didn't know her then. I do now. I'm here because a woman named O'Dellin created a blueprint that people like me now get to build on." I felt my mother's hand brush mine. She leaned in and said softly, "You were never invisible. They just closed their eyes." And I breathed in. After the applause, I didn't go up for a photo. I didn't wave. I simply stood, met the eyes of those who looked my way, and nodded once. That evening, I hosted a small dinner. Just a few people. Lyndon, Marcellus, my old mentor from the early product years. We didn't talk about lawsuits or boardrooms. We shared stories, laughed over memories no one else remembered. At one point, Marcellus handed me a small leather-bound notebook. "It was your father's. He kept it in his desk drawer, said it was for things that didn't need to be filed, just remembered." Inside, on the first page, in his slanted, all-cap handwriting, "You were always the anchor. You never needed the spotlight." I closed the book slowly. Later, after everyone had gone and the dishes had been washed, I stood by the sliding doors and looked out toward the water. The wind had calmed. The tide was pulling out. Some chairs, I realized, were never meant to be filled. Some were meant to be left empty, as a reminder. Some stories don't end with applause. They end with a quiet reclaiming of truth. O'Dellin didn't fight to be seen. She chose to stand tall where they once tried to erase her. Have you ever felt written out of your own family's story, like the seat you once held was never yours to begin with? If this family drama moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that speak where silence once lived.